Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl, and welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt. What if compassion wasn't just something we felt, but something we could move with, something we could practice, not just with our minds or hearts, but through our bodies? Today I'm speaking with Adam Lacey, a counselling psychologist and compassion-focused therapy practitioner based in Oxfordshire, UK. But beyond his work as a therapist, Adam offers something quite extraordinary. T'ai Chi Chih, a mindful, moving meditation that brings compassion to life through gentle, flowing movements. Adam teaches T'ai Chi Chih to hundreds of participants across diverse community groups, including refugees, children, older adults, and people facing homelessness, trauma, or recovery. It's not a martial art, it's not strenuous, but it just might shift something profound inside you. In this conversation, we explore what T'ai Chi Chih is, its fascinating origins with founder Justin Stone, the role of Chi or intrinsic energy, and how movement itself can be a quiet but powerful expression of compassion, even in the face of suffering. And so I bring you Adam Lacey. So good. All right. Well, Adam Lacey, welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you.
When we first corresponded, you mentioned something that really caught my attention, which is this idea that that compassion too can be taught or experienced or felt through movement, and you spoke about this practice called T'ai Chi Chih. And I suppose I was hoping to start there, really, for those who perhaps haven't heard of it before, or what exactly is T'ai Chi Chih?
Yeah, okay, well, thank you, Stan. So it's a pleasure to tell you a bit more about it and to let your listeners know a bit more about it. So T'ai Chi Chih is a form of moving meditation. It's something that, the practice itself is 19 movements and one posture. And it's, although the name might sound a bit like Tai Chi Chuan or Tai Chi Shibashi or other kinds of it is not a martial art, it's a healing art. So the focus is really on your internal wellness. It's not a physical exercise, although you may well feel after having done it that you've had a workout. But the movements are slow. Often the kind of the stereotype of seeing people maybe moving in the parks or it's got that element of softness and presence to the practice. Typically, people report about a calming of the mind and a circulating of this vital force of Qi throughout the body.
Mm. What are the origins, really, then, of Tai Chi Chih? The Justin Stone, I think, is the name that I came across. But yeah, how did it sort of come into being, or how did he sort of develop this unique practice?
Yeah, well, Justin, he's no longer with us. He's a man who was a stockbroker in the States many years ago. The practice in itself has gone past its 50th anniversary. That's not long in terms of these kinds of practices, the time span. But he was a stockbroker. He was a jazz musician. He was an artist, a writer. During his he had some interesting encounters whilst working in the stock market, which changed the direction of his life. And he ended up traveling more and spending more time in the East, in Japan, in India, and other countries in the Far East, learning, living in ashrams, meditating, practicing moving meditation practices. He became a master of Tai Chi Chuan and Qigong, and he came back to the States in the 70s and was offering this through a university, but finding that the uptake with Tai Chi Chuan, people were coming and starting, but there was a lot of moves to learn. There were certain things about the discipline and the rigor and the martial arts application, which he came to the understanding or the realization that in order to convey something about how to channel and benefit from, to be nourished by your vital force, that it didn't necessarily require all of this. and distilled this into a very much condensed practice, these 19 moves and one posture.
Hmm. You've actually mentioned Chi a couple of times there, and I suppose it would be great to hear a little bit about, this idea of Chi, or this intrinsic energy that you're alluding to there, and perhaps like how would you describe Chi, or how might we try to connect more with that aspect of ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I suppose if you'd asked me that question some years ago, I think I probably would have answered it very differently. My
Mm.
background as a counselling psychologist, as a meditation teacher, and I guess a few different specialisms that I work with. This is something that I wasn't so familiar with, although I'd practiced with martial arts for a number of years. That no teacher had ever introduced me to this in any meaningful way. But I guess how I have come into contact with it is primarily, rather than trying to research it and read about it, was about through my own body, through my own experience of my own body, and letting that be the measure, really. I mean, I suppose one way we might understand it, the life force in all animate, in all living beings. We might refer to it as an energy flow, the wisdom of the body. A vibrationary quality to a vibratory, quality to it, and something that when we slow down and listen is more accessible to us.
Yeah, let's sort of explore that a little more. It's a sort of an energy. It's a sort of a vibration. It's within living beings, around living beings in the world, or is it
Yeah.
something that really is within the living being, and it's something that one can connect with, or make contact with and experience and notice and observe? Just yeah, tell us a bit more about Chi.
Yeah, in and around. And I wouldn't claim to be any kind of an expert in
Yeah.
understanding what she is. I suppose how I see it in terms of partially how I encounter it, how the people that come to my classes seem to describe it. Well, first of all, I think it's important. So there is no requirement or need to believe in this to experience the benefits of it. I have seen many people within a session or within a couple of sessions start to describe some of these experiences of hands tingling, of warmth, moving up and down the body, of a sense of serenity, of an inner spaciousness. These are, I think, I would understand these all to be manifestations of this life force that flows within and around us. And a practice like this that helps us to bring our attention to how we move, to raise our body awareness, how we breathe, how we are. These are ways of connecting with this chi, with this
Mm.
flow
Mm.
of energy.
Are we able to use the acronym TCC? Is that a thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Because I guess I was curious, because the movements and the posture. Yeah. What does a TCC session actually look like? I think straight after this you're heading across the road to run a session. So yeah. What would someone expect? If they were to participate there.
Yeah, um, so coming into so many of my classes are around about sort of 25, 30 people in a class. There are some classes that I run in our National Health Service here in the UK that maybe around about 10 to 15, depending on the size of the venue. But you'll walk into a space where it perhaps feels pretty calm, a welcoming space. There's a growing community within Oxfordshire of practitioners. We have this thing in common. You're not wearing any fancy gear. There's no hierarchy. There's no special equipment, and there really is a kind of no pressure atmosphere to it. We begin with some perhaps with some light humor, but there's a quiet moment of arriving into the body, and starting to move through this gentle sequence. And this is something that people coming into the class, they may do it standing, or they may do it seated, and the pace is slow. The movements are circular. They can eventually start to feel more natural. The movements and flowing. There's a real emphasis on this on this central concept of wu wei, or the effort of no effort, or trying not to try so hard. And I think to begin with, that can be something that I wouldn't necessarily say is jarring, but it's quite different for a number of people who may be striving or trying to achieve things, and even down to the way they express Tai Chi Chih through their bodies. There's a shift from moving with your head, thinking about things, through to really experiencing the raw sensation and moving from your center, from the center of your body, flowing from there, really. And that through the principles of movement, which is introduced right from the beginning, but repeated in every session in one way or another, is where we start to experience how we may be able to show up for our bodies, to be kind with our bodies, to be kind with our experience, to look after ourselves through maybe challenging experiences.
It begins with, I don't know if this is the word one might use, but a sort of a safeness. There's a sort of a safeness in the group. People arrive, and like you say, there's a calmness, there's a playfulness, there's some humor, but it feels kind of safe. And then people might go on to, especially if they're getting started, they need that safeness, because there can be a kind of a self-consciousness maybe that sort of can come up as we're learning something new, and then gradually the body gets more familiar with it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So coming into any group, and if you're new to it, of course there's going to be a lot of looking out, and it's not unnatural for there to be an element of, I've got to get this right, even if you're not coming in with very high standards, or kind of a high motivation to want to kind of master this quickly. Just the same, you're likely to be more self-conscious. But typically what's happening from relatively early on is, well, people are very welcoming in the groups, but there is this initial focus towards kind of, as it were, follow the leader, follow the person at the front, but with an encouragement towards maybe slightly different from your average class, a shift towards start to follow yourself. So shifting from follow the leader and towards using them as a reference point, but ever focusing more keenly on what you're experiencing, from the grounding experience into the soles of the feet, through to what we start to notice is that there's a kind of an emerging collective kind of stillness that starts to take place, almost like a hum. It's very quiet, and at the same time, it's very noticeable. And that has something to do with this, with people then talking about feeling more grounded, feeling clearer, feeling lighter.
Yeah, lots of really kind of familiar words there in a way. If I'm thinking CFT, even, the safeness I sort of said, but the groundedness, there's that kind of collective sense, that we're sort of together, and that sense of connection, and it's almost like it's the chi that gets into sync a little bit with each of us, and there's that sort of hum that you describe, or that silence together is sort of a mutually shared energy, or something that starts to really flow amongst us, and it's kind of silent but palpable in a sense, this feeling.
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head there. It is silent, but it's definitely so. It's very loud in a way, and the experience of kind of a bit like what's the word, murmuration, where maybe birds move together, or where fish are moving together, or there's the experience of all of us moving together, for this very relatively simple form to learn and to practice with. The movements are not particularly demanding in that sense, but where each individual in the group, as they focus more and more into their own experience, they're noticing more things like posture, their breath, how they may be really concentrating and holding their breath, and little reminders to continue to breathe, and to discover and rediscover their balance when they're feeling off balance, and to ground throughout the process. So it's when their body's more recognizing the movements, to feel the feet, to bring the focus of attention back down to the feet. So, and that remaining that sort of anchor of attention. And there is a kind of connectedness that comes from us all kind of doing similar things at the same time. And how to describe this? We have moments of where we pause in the practice, and we might sit for some inquiry. How are you experiencing things? How are you experiencing them through the body? Or when your mind was being pulled away like that, how did that show up in the body? Or was there, maybe they're describing tension or a looseness throughout the body, but where people are starting to notice their own unique, as it were, thumbprint of how they experience their emotions, their thoughts, that sort of thing, in conjunction. And there's a kind of common humanity that comes through various elements of the practice, but also the inquiry, I think, is often key in terms of reflecting on experience.
Yes, the common humanity and the togetherness. You mentioned kindness before. I mean, I suppose in some of our earlier correspondence, you did say this idea that really struck a chord, and that there's a sort of a healthy dose of compassion, I guess, taught through the body-mind practice. And you're a CFT therapist, I think, as well, and so you sort of have a real grounding in that. I mean, can you unpack that a bit for us? Where does compassion come into it, or how might that sort of actually sort of emerge from it? The practice. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I think in some ways I'm still working my way through this. There's something during the practice and working with your own physical body where principles are around, for example, softness, but where many people will at points where judgment may well show up, and limitations may well show up, and out of that, the self-critic may emerge. And so whilst we may not use those kinds of terminology or even necessarily mention very often about compassion, there is something about being more aware of what mind is showing up, and of how we might want to respond to that with gentleness, with understanding, with an awareness that we can all struggle, and it can be very painful. It can be very difficult to come to the point where the body isn't doing what you want it to do, or how you want it to do it, or it's aching, it's not functioning like it did the previous week, in terms of the comparing mind showing up, and how we respond to that with kindness and understanding, with a wisdom of that it can really be like this, and with an intention towards how best to look after yourself. That might be during the practice to pause, to take a comfort break, to sit. It may be to move just slightly closer to the edges of the discomfort as it's showing up in the body, but with raising awareness of whether it's a stoic mindset that's showing up, or a kind of I'm just going to push through the pain mindset. So all the while kind of I guess raising awareness, understanding familiarity with which minds can show up, and how we might best want to respond to that, really.
There's the body-based part of it, I suppose, things like breathing and posture and movement. I mean, we sort of think about those in CFT, and it's always where we might begin things, isn't it? Is to try to kind of create that sort of prepare the body to sort of prepare for the practice, and that's really just a part of the whole session that you might have. But kind of oddly enough, the session itself offers opportunities to practice compassion, because you might notice certain aspects of the body, certain pains or discomforts or kind of suffering might arise as we're in that state. And so the practice itself offers this chance to sort of try out compassion. It's not really explicitly named or necessarily spoken of. It's more, in a way, the vibe of the I don't know if that's the right word, but it's sort of like the vibe of the session that creates that.
I'm still working on how I might kind of draw these two together, how to understand them in the language of the other. But there is we're cultivating a deep commitment towards looking after oneself, and that seems to filter out into looking after others in the group, and from the feedback I'm hearing about from my own experience, towards um, being there and showing up for other people in our communities. But there's also, I mean, there's something of the flow, the feel of this kind of a practice that seems to mingle holding fast and letting go, and ever more kind of fine tuning of that, when to hold fast, when to let go, which seems to generalize into people's day-to-day lives in terms of how at moments of difficulty in their day-to-day life, it might be in an argument, it might be in a difficult experience with, you know, when they're out and about in their day-to-day lives, or with their own experience of their minds and bodies, that some of these principles and this key learning seems to show up, and they're able to tap into that without necessarily having to go into a kind of movement practice, but able to tap into the kind of the well of what we're drawing from in Tai Chi Chih.
It's funny because in CFT we start with some relatively heady things, don't we? We start with psychoeducation stuff, and we talk about the 3 circles model, and we talk about evolution, and we talk about what is compassion, and then as we move through, we become more body based, and then eventually embodying of the compassion itself. With this, it really starts with the embodiment, in a way, that there's not the words used to sort of help people learn stuff. It's not really instructional in that sense. It's experiential right from the get-go. It's about movement and posture, and it's about creating a felt sense, much more so, of what it is to be self-aware and self-kind, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, and I think it presents multiple opportunities throughout practice for your relationship with your mind, your relationship with your body, your relationship with your experience of how you're experiencing that moment. Just countless opportunities to become aware of that, and to make a choice, raising the possibility of choice as to how you meet that.
What was your own journey with Tai Chi Chih? I mean, how did you perhaps discover it, and what did you notice as you progressed, and in terms of your own, perhaps your own healing and recovery?
That's an interesting question. So I'd worked in the NHS for many years as a practicing psychologist, and as a clinical manager and supervisor, and I had probably reached the point of burning out. I would say I attended the year of training with Paul Gilbert and the faculty at Derby, training with CFT, and was practicing with the different aspects of CFT practice we were exposed to in that wonderful year, and it made me take a good hard look at myself and how I was looking after myself or not, and maybe not practicing what I was teaching. So I took a bit of time out. I was very lucky to be able to do that. Not many of us don't get the chance to, but during that time out, I encountered Tai Chi Chih, and I was finding myself feeling really energized, really nourished, feeling well, and thinking to myself, oh, let me just carry on with practice. But I approached the teacher and said, I think this is something I'd like to learn how to teach. So then embarked upon a journey of kind of becoming a teacher eventually, and then just sharing it from there, really.
And you've shared it with really hundreds of participants, I think, in a whole range of settings. I mean, today is, I think, in a park. It's sort of a local park that you're doing that, but I think you've been into prisons, perhaps, and health settings and so on. Is that what? Tell us a bit about where you've been applying this stuff.
So currently I've got about 400 students. I'm teaching in about 11 locations at the moment, but they're really, it's so fascinating, Stan, the way, often you can go and you knock on a door and say, well, I've got this, I'd like to share with your group, or with your staff group, or with your client group. And people are so inviting and curious about what might be of benefit. I think it helps that, with the focus on self-care, on stress management, on mindfulness that's been an area of focus in this country for a while now. So groups from, my youngest students are about 5 or 6 at a primary
Oh,
school.
okay.
I've been teaching an entire primary school this practice over the course of a year. And my oldest students are 104. That's at a residential home. But
Oh,
I teach in settings from where housing projects for people who have been experiencing homelessness and substance misuse problems, through to client groups where people are refugees having fled persecution, through to kind of mixed populations of people, through to older adults, where there is perhaps a slightly more of an emphasis around falls prevention, around balance and confidence. So really quite a broad spectrum, and I'm constantly looking out. And you're right, yes, I have taught in forensic settings. I'm often also offering taster sessions where I might go out to teams and let them know about this and say, well, these classes are freely available in the community. I offer them as free to access. I usually look for funding from different sources so that I can offer them free to access in the community. And so let them know about it, but also raise awareness that this isn't the only route through to through mind body practices, through to finding better well-being, really.
I mean, that's really an incredible age span that you are working with, and sort of wonderful contribution to people of all ages, and all sorts of different settings. I wonder what it is about Tai Chi Chih that really seems to meet people in their suffering, or in their life circumstance, their life situation. And what are your thoughts there?
I think there's something. I mean, I guess we can have different kinds of relationships with our bodies.
Yeah.
That it's a reference point that we can keep coming back to. There's a common aspect that if we have the experience of feeling ourselves being in a body, I'm drawing on kind of feedback over the months and years, really, and my own experience. But there's something about it enhancing this mind body connection and the awareness of the body. Often, I'm generalizing, I know, but often we can spend our lives in quite a sedentary way, and with moving like this and becoming more aware of the body, its movement in space, becoming more aware of the sensations in the body as we move, aches and pains, but also how it might feel lighter. Many people talk about this coming into sessions and almost as if their nervous system is kind of going, "Ah, I'm okay, I'm safe here, I'm okay in myself, I'm okay." And the experience of just being able to, I say just, but being able to let go, to being able to put down something of what they're carrying around, the distress, the struggle, the experience of the suffering, and to focus in on what they're doing as they're doing it. It seems to allow some space for something other than being on guard, trying to be ready for the next thing that's coming their way.
Yeah. It's beautifully described. It's sort of, like when we're sort of able to arrive in a safe place and feel calm and grounded, and really connect with the body, and sort of experience the body in movement, and be kind, bring kindness to that experience, and
Absolutely.
and as part of a collective, as part of a group, and feeling that kind of collective hum. It all just kind of comes together as this sort of way that just sort of make it alleviates suffering, and makes life feel more doable in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, the P word here, but thinking back to the pandemic and what happened in certainly I can talk to the community that I live in Oxfordshire, where the community centres, the kind of hubs of meeting and of coming together, of cohesion in the community, they were decimated, probably like they were in places across the world, really. And so all the activities that were going on of many different descriptions had ceased. And so when I began teaching in the community, there was this working with community leaders and community centre managers about encouraging people back out again, out of isolation, out of being quite separate in many different ways, maybe with a lingering fear about getting together, and their habits had changed. And so bringing people together like this for something that was gentle, that had a physical element to it, so they felt their body moving, they felt the well-being that can come from moving, but also that interaction beforehand, that interaction afterwards, that moving together without having to say anything, without the pressure to have to be witty or insightful or something like that. I felt very privileged to be part of supporting the community towards coming back together. I think about kind of in the community centres, but in the primary schools, where teachers are under a lot of pressure with reduced budgets and resources, and years being combined together with other years. And I was teaching in my children's primary school, so where they're talking about children coming back to school with mental health struggles, and to be able to introduce something that is light, that was fun, where they could be involved in the authoring in some way, giving the movements different names, that we practiced together, that we had videos of me and my kids that they could practice when they went home, that became a focus, something that many of the kids talked about was their favorite subject, and where the teachers could incorporate this, because they were coming along sessions, they could incorporate this into 5 minutes at the beginning when kids come in, or after the lunch break, and some children are really high up and some are really flat perhaps at the beginning, and where to get them into a kind of more of an optimal zone for behavior and for learning, really.
Our social safeness took such a hit, didn't it, with the pandemic, I guess, and we ended up spending a lot of time in a more isolated sort of space, and it was scary to come back out, and to people had been drilled into us as being the threats. Other people were the threats, and we had to stay away and wear masks and not work from home and all the rest of it. But this was a really lovely way for people to venture back out and venture out to something that sort of warmly welcomed them with that sort of return to social safeness, whether that was people of all ages, really, and including in schools and so on. It had a profound effect for people to be able to return to sort of living again, and living in community, I suppose, in a sense.
Absolutely. With the number of pressures that people are aware of, there are things that we can draw from in terms of that sense of connection, being able to, that sense of being part of something bigger than ourselves, a community that can perhaps lend some comfort and can often lend itself to practical support at times, but also the emotional support of being part of something bigger than ourselves.
So where do people find the local group or opportunities to be part of it all?
Well, I mean, again, not at all being tribal. I think there are many different routes in terms of mind-body practices to experiencing these benefits. Harvard Medical School have literally written the book on the evidence base around many different mind-body practices, and Tai Chi and Qigong central in that book. And I was presenting Tai Chi Chih at a conference at Harvard and OSHA about a year ago, just at an international conference, just seeing the number of practitioners from different directions that are looking at these practices, from psychologists through to neuroscientists, through to people that specialize in heart health, respiratory health, and beyond. The list is long of different potential benefits. But how we might access these? Well, I suppose, I mean, in my community in Oxfordshire, we're lucky that we have 5 active teachers of Tai Chi Chih, but we only have 7 in the entire country at the moment. If you were looking to access Tai Chi Chih in particular, you go to the community website or the foundation website for Tai Chi Chih and could discover where local teachers are. However, there are also videos, DVDs. There's streaming through the website, and there are free to access on YouTube videos of the entire practice, seated and standing. So you could encounter it and start to practice it just through the videos themselves that are online, free to access.
I might actually get from you later the name of that book from the Harvard, the book on body mind practices, and perhaps some of your favorite links, even if you, I'll check on you later for that, because yeah, that'd be great just to include in the description below. People can look into it if they're interested. What do you think is next for you with it all? Have you got aspirations of where you might try to work in this way next?
Yeah, well, true to form with this blend between holding fast and letting go.
Yes.
I'm trying not to get too dragged into my enthusiasm is very much there for to continue to teach in the community, to let more people know about it. So to go to more places, offer taster sessions, to write about it, to present it at conferences. The part of the direction really is through training more people who are interested in teachers. So I was at an event last year, a mindfulness conference in the Midlands in the UK, and did a taster session with a few colleagues to about 30 people from the conference who are interested. And out of that, we've had a number of people come forward who are interested. They're mindfulness teachers already, MBCT and I believe MBSR teachers. They are training with me now online to become teachers of Tai Chi Chih. And that's a process of at least a year. But it's not, it gets more intensive as you go through the training. I'm interested in collaborating on doing some research around this, really. There is research from different directions. Tai Chi Chih lends itself well to being studied in terms of a protocol, because it's a set number of moves that are taught the same way wherever it's taught in the world, and it's a small number of moves. It's something that in sort of 8 to 10 sessions you can learn how to do. So it lends itself well to I believe to quantitative research, but mixed methods approach as well in terms of the qualitative aspects of what people are experiencing, perhaps when they're experiencing flow. What are some of the benefits to their psychological, to their physical well-being, to their social well-being? These are areas that I have questions in, that I get lots of feedback from people of different ages, and I would like to study it further. If there's anyone out there who's interested in studying something like this, I'd love to have a chat with you about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, there's a lot of that anecdotal evidence, isn't there, really, that people just experience the changes, and you did yourself, and it inspired you, and people, are sort of following in your footsteps, also feeling those benefits. Thank you for sharing with us a little bit about Tai Chi Chih, and I think we'll include some of those little sort of links in the description below. But yeah, Adam Lacey, thank you for coming and speaking with me on Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you, Stan.